We all have a story to tell. Let's tell yours. Welcome to the Intellectual People Podcast with your host, Jason. Come together and listen to journey stories and more from interesting people. Welcome your host, Jason.
Welcome to the Intellectual People Podcast. Today I have Matheo Galatis. Did I get that right?
Yeah, you got it right.
All right. Matheo is a transformational coach, correct?
Yes.
Matheo, please explain what that is exactly.
Maybe it'll make sense to understand a bit of my background or to build it up to that. But essentially, so you get life coaches, you get professional coaches, you get executive coaches, you get a number of different coaches. And my intention is always when I work with someone or when I provide some kind of content or when I'm doing a talk or any interaction, my aim is to bring transformation, is to bring some kind of information through that's not only going to be information or data for a person, but that's going to get them to think to such a degree that they're able to make different choices for their lives. And that's on the surface, but on a deeper level, to offer people a perspective that they're able to literally transform the foundation of how they live, how they act, how they make decisions, and how they behave. So that's the essence of transformation. What I also do is I teach human behavior principles that support people to understand the foundations of how they live their life, of how life works, and also what the hidden determinants and the hidden dynamics are that affect our lives. A lot of the times we live our life and we think, oh, we're having a relationship challenge, we're having a financial challenge, we're having a problem at work or something. And that's the symptom. That's what we see happening on the surface. But 99% of our life is driven by the unconscious, driven by variables that most of us are not aware of. And I want to help people to see these variables that they don't know is informing their life and actually creating their life and informing their decisions and their actions. So that's always been my interest. And where transformation is linked to that is I want to identify the core that is causing the effects in their lives and transform the core. Once the core is transformed, you don't have the symptoms anymore. The same with healing.
Thank you. Let's go back. Did you always plan on doing this for a living? Did you always think you'd work in the emotional space, if you will?
I always had an affinity towards spirituality, towards religion, towards philosophy, towards understanding human behavior, mystical elements. I always had an affinity towards that. And both my parents were not deeply into spirituality, but they were aware of, my mother studied under a mystic here in Cyprus who used to perform healings and people used to transform. So kind of this hands-on healing was quite well known internationally as well. And people used to fly over here and receive healing and instruction from him and meditation. And he was self-taught as well. So my mother was in those circles and practiced a little bit of meditation and used to listen to teachings, but found it very difficult to apply it in her life and transform her life. Not because she didn't try or anything like that. It was more knowledge. So I believe I took from there and took it to the next level of actually implementing the knowledge and the wisdom and bringing it into a transformation space. So I think intrinsically, and I believe intrinsically, we all have a specific purpose. We're born with it. We don't have to make it or something like that. We're born with a particular direction. And I believe if we pay attention to children and allow them to explore and be creative and find themselves and connect to their own inner guidance and learn what is important for them, what is valuable for them, what are their needs, then they're able to independently start to explore life and identify what's important for them. But unfortunately, the way we have built society, we kind of parents think they know better than their children, than the children know. And I'd like to turn that around a little bit, because I believe that we're born intrinsically knowing what we're here to do, what our skills are, what our capabilities are, what's good for us, what's not good. And of course, we need some guidance. But that guidance has become very instructive, and okay, you go do this because this is right, and I have my beliefs as a parent, and you should, I know the world that I've come from, but we don't know the world that the child is going into. So I believe it's coming back to my story, because I'm a natural teacher, so I tend to teach inside of the story. But coming back to my story, so I believe internally I had this affinity towards spirituality, understanding human behavior and all of that. And I got derailed. And the derailment was actually part of my journey to move full circle, to find myself and find and fulfill on that purpose that I'm here to fulfill. And the derailment began with having a very strong father. And my father was a military man, and he was actually a very emotional and caring person, but that was shut down. It was very disconnected when he was young, because he was a military guy, and you got to be strong and macho and all of that. And when my dad spoke, people listened. He was very influential. I mean, I remember when I was around 14 years old in South Africa, we were driving to church. My mother was back in Cyprus. She went to visit her family, and we were driving to church during Easter. We're not very church going, but during Easter, it's part of the tradition. So off we went. And something happened at the petrol station while we were filling up. And there were police trying to arrest someone, and they couldn't get it right. And my father was a reservist. And he started shouting at the police there, and then he got upset, and he went to the police station, and he started screaming at the police officers there that were on duty, something they weren't doing right. I don't know what, but we had 4 police officers, some quite high rank, not quite captain or anything like that. They stood outside at attention, and my dad went in to go do some work or go do what wasn't being done. So I mean, this was the kind of power that he had. People listened to him, and he wasn't an official police officer. He was just a reservist, but because of his presence and his ability to bring himself forward, he claimed his title or whatever it is. So I had a very strong father, and in my personal development exploration, in exploring my mind and myself and my past and childhood, etc., I discovered that I developed a number of beliefs about myself, about my dad, and I shut down my emotions from a very young age, probably around 2 years old, if not sooner. I shut myself down because it wasn't safe to express my emotions. It wasn't safe to express my truth. It wasn't safe to cry. It wasn't safe to get angry back at my father, of course, because he would say, keep quiet and get out of here. So from a very young age, I shut myself down emotionally, and I diverted my attention to developing intellectually. So that became my life, or my modus operandi, so to speak. That's how I lived. So if there was anything emotional, it was like already blocked and suppressed and cut off from a very young age. And I had very little emotional response in my body. To the degree that at 16 years old, I was involved in an armed robbery. I was at a friend's supermarket in South Africa, and 4 guys came in, shooting a gun in the air. It was around closing time. They closed the door, 2 gunshots. We're like, what's going on? They start screaming and shouting. We're like, what's happening? Like it didn't register. The moment it registered, a few seconds later, I was on the floor. The guys came, gun to their head, and demanding money. eventually they realized, okay, my friend owns the business. They went and beat him up a little bit, and he opened the safe and gave them money, and they locked us up in the room where the safe was. Another gunshot onto the wall, and there were four of us: myself, my friend, an employee, and a customer in the room, locked up, kind of in a cage. And I remember in the moment they left, we were just quiet, silent, face down on the floor. The moment they left, my body started to shake. Later on, I discovered this was a trauma release. And I didn't know what to do. It was shaking uncontrollably. And my friend said, okay, relax. It's gone now. But my body was doing its thing. It was releasing trauma naturally. And that's what the body does. Because what happened to me is I went into a freeze response, which was my normal state from learning from childhood. I just freeze, cut off emotions. And this is what animals do in the wild as well. They, whenever a zebra is attacked by a lion or some kind of predator and they get away, they shake off the trauma from their system. And that's why they don't have back problems or illnesses or anything like that, because they learn to deal with trauma and traumatic situations and emotional charges. We don't. A lot of times, most of us don't. We haven't been taught, we haven't been trained to deal with emotions, and emotions get stuck in the system. And unless we release them physically out of our system or emotionally through crying, then it remains stuck and it can cause illness much later on. So they asked me, eventually we broke out of the room and we called the police and all of that. And I remember a police officer asking, do you need a psychologist or a therapist or something? And I said, no, I'm okay. So it wasn't quite the right answer, because I needed some support. I didn't know I needed, because I'm okay, I'm fine. Look, I'm alive.
Right.
Who knows what's suppressed inside my system, or what fears or anger got emerged. And later on in my life, it did kind of come out. But the suppression of it made it a lot worse. And I needed to undergo a number of processes to release the anger, to release whatever was in my system. So this, trying to tie back to, this is a situation that happened in my life that, once again, it was an example of having been numb emotionally and not asking for help. Not because I didn't want to, because I didn't know it was necessary. I wasn't aware. And now, looking back, I would have definitely gone to someone I trust and I know to talk through it. I didn't even talk through it with my parents. It wasn't spoken about. It was just, okay, this happened. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm okay. Yeah, but hang on. How do you feel? What's the feeling? If I went into it then, I would have said, wow, I'm shocked. I'm traumatized. I'm afraid. I'm angry. I'm all these emotions. There was no processing of the event. So I had quite intense experiences. At 17 years old, my brother passed away from a car accident, another traumatic experience. I never fully cried or processed that experience either. At 25, my mother died. So it continued. But eventually, at some point, just to backtrack, I was so, as a result of my upbringing, my brain, my intellect was quite well developed. So I was very good in business subjects, accounting, some mathematics, not top of the grade, but I was top in accounting and business. And I did an aptitude test at school, looking at what am I going to study, what am I going to become in my life. And although internally I felt a deep desire to explore spirituality, philosophy, all these things, natural healing, nutrition, I I chose accounting because the aptitude test said, well, here you go. You got this intellect. You're good in business and accounting. You got to be a chartered accountant, or CPA as they are in the US. And I said, well, yeah, I get it. And I got it. I had that. I was good at it. It was visible, but there was another side of me that wasn't shown to the world. I'd suppressed. I'd closed off my creative side. I closed off the emotional side. So I wasn't a complete human being in how I showed up in the world. I was very shy. I was quiet until it was safe for me to come out. Then I would come out when with friends or something like that. Then I would show more of who I am. But I was kind of very mystical. And so I studied and became a chartered accountant. And here's something interesting. While I was a student, I worked in a restaurant, and I loved it. I loved it because I would interact with people. I could serve. I would use my great intellect to see, okay, what's wrong? Food's not coming out. Teaspoons aren't washed. So I go to the kitchen. I say, organize this. I would like to take over. Eventually, I got promoted to a manager very young. But I went and studied as an accountant, and I remember 6 months into my internship with a big auditing firm, one of the big fours, I was bored. I was soulless. Yeah. I couldn't do that work. It was like I remember the thoughts. I just want to go back to being a waiter because I loved it so much. I was alive. And in the end, I didn't go back to work as a waiter. I pushed through, but it was very difficult for me. It was very difficult to sit in front of a screen. And as much as I could do the work and all of that, it just, my soul was not alive. So fast forward a few years, I eventually moved to understanding, or I got directed into, I had certain experiences that made me seek out spiritual healing. I started meditating, doing yoga. Yoga is a physical practice. I enjoyed it. Eventually, I got involved with a group of people that taught me how to do meditation a little bit deeper and learn certain skills like reading the tarot and numerology and all of that. So I trained up in Reiki and energy healing, and then eventually I gained coaching skills. I did a coaching diploma through a coaching organization that's accredited through International Coaching Federation. I became a trainer of that organization. I trained trainers. I was one of the senior trainers of coaches and trainers. And I added a bunch of other tools into my toolkit. And in 2009, I walked away completely from the accounting profession, and I started coaching, which didn't quite work out in the beginning because I didn't know how to market myself. I didn't know how to sell myself. I didn't have the emotional capacity as an entrepreneur. And I believe every entrepreneur, yes, they might have the intellect, they might have the skill, they might have a trade or something, but you need a few other things in place to make it through as an entrepreneur or as an independent. Emotional strength is one of them. So I didn't have the emotional strength, and if I would have a no, if I would have a a disappointment or something, I would be disappointed for a week, if not 2 weeks, and I would be online responding to emails or watching videos or trying to learn, not doing what I needed to do to grow the business and get out there. And that's a bit of an understanding of how I got to do what I am. Partly intrinsically, it was inside of me to do that. I wasn't fulfilled doing what other people told me is right for me, other people being institutions and schools. And I kind of found my way through just trusting myself and trusting my intuition to go learn, and I learned a number of different tools and skills. Including therapy. I learned a form of therapy that actually helps get to the root cause of an issue. And through putting all these tools together, that's what I do now. And I love every moment. You don't have to wake me up. I don't fall asleep when I'm working. I don't get tired. I can literally do it from morning to night and still have energy afterwards.
Do you believe that's a true sign of loving what you're doing?
Yeah. I believe you love what you do when you're congruent to who you really are. And when we find that congruence in ourselves, it's not about going outside and doing a certain formula of things or taking the 5 steps to living your purpose or anything like that. It's not about that. It's about literally going into yourself and understanding, who am I? What am I about? What do I love? What do I enjoy? Where do I get energized in life? Where do I find myself naturally, spontaneously being focused, organized? When we ask ourselves those questions, then we actually realize that there's certain things that we have an affinity to doing and certain things that we don't. And yes, at the same time, sometimes we need to build some skills and do some trainings, etc. But there is an intrinsic desire to fulfill something. And I believe every one of us should go inside and identify that. It doesn't matter what the outside world says or what your parents say or the schools or anything. What do you love to do?
Matheo, when you said about your therapy training, can you expound on that a little bit, of what type of training that is for what type of therapy?
The form of therapy that I initially trained in was family constellation therapy. I was at a gathering of people, and one lady looked at me and she says, "You need to try." We were doing shadow work at the time, and she says, "You need to look up family constellation work." And I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it was about, and I went and found some people involved in that work, and I found a great mentor and a teacher. And my mind was blown away. So essentially, what happens is, us as children, we take on patterns, physical, emotional, and mental patterns from previous generations, our parents, our grandparents, great-grandparents, and so on. It can go up to 7 generations back. We've traced it back to 9, 10, 11 generations, a specific pattern. So what happens is, you might be living a life, you might be having financial challenges, you might be having relationship challenges, you might be having conflicts with your parents, with your siblings, and you might be going to therapy, you might be doing affirmations, meditation, a bunch of stuff. And nothing shifts, nothing changes. Because it could be that the cause originates in a family pattern that you're carrying from your father, grandfather, grandmother, etc., from generations back. And unless you give it back to the person that you're carrying it from, then it's not possible to resolve the pattern. You'll just keep doing therapy and all of that and thinking, oh, it's my fault, it's something I'm doing wrong. But I found a number of times that once you resolve the family pattern, the stuff literally changes. The symptoms, the relationships get better, the financial challenges get better once the family patterns are healed. So I was blown away by this work, and just first of all the realization that, wow, we take on stuff from our ancestors, and also that we that it affects our life so much, and the possibility that it's able to heal. So that blew my mind, and I ended up attending almost every weekend a workshop just to be part of that energy and get vulnerable and connect to myself emotionally and all of that. So my inner work kind of started there. It was back in 2007. And it just continued. It continued, and I just built on top of it. I did work with a number of different therapists and healers that were not quite clinically trained, but went into the deeper work, and I found it worked for me.
Matheo, is it safe to say that your work is not a substitute for somebody that requires a psychiatrist?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's a substitute, because different people need different interventions at different times.
Right.
So I believe everything has a place.
Okay.
Although many people don't know that there's other methods, other systems, available to them, so they remain stuck in traditional therapy or what's being offered mainstream. And I think a lot of that stuff could continue long before, or can continue even when it's kind of finished. So that kind of therapy or intervention might be needed for a year, but then the person carries on that intervention for 5-10 years, and they could have pivoted to do another intervention that could support them to resolve the issue in a couple of years, for example. So I believe a lot of the things, a lot of the challenges that we're having, there's other interventions that can help us accelerate the work. And that's what I want to try help people to understand, specifically through my Know Yourself teachings. I created a set of teachings to help understand emotions, understand thoughts, that makes it easy for people to understand, with none of these complex theories and all of that. It's kind of street psychology, I'd like to call it, but based on real case studies, based on my own experience, and based on everything I've learned from people who are masterful in understanding human behavior and having put all these systems together. I want to teach what I know so people can understand, hang on, if this is happening in my life, maybe it's not something I did wrong. Maybe it's something coming from the family system. Maybe it's a belief, something that happened in my childhood. So, for example, I've worked with a number of people that have had anxiety or panic attacks, and psychiatry, and maybe they don't know better, but they'll give them a pill or some kind of drug to help them calm, and that's okay. It might work. It might be necessary in some situations, but I've seen many times that it's given, and the issue could have been resolved without any drug or any medical intervention. Once again, I'm not making it wrong with saying don't take it. It's just let's look at the cause. So I've worked, a lady came to me and she says, look, this happened and I've got anxiety and they put me on this treatment. I'm like, okay, do you want to stay on this stuff? She says, I actually don't feel good taking them, but I've got to take them. I'm like, great, come and see me. So she came and saw me, and within a session, we identified the cause of the anxiety. She came for a follow-up session and she already came off the pills. And in the follow-up session, we kind of removed the cause and she automatically felt calmer. So I did it with a 16-year-old teenager as well, and a few other case studies. But the teenager was anxious going to school because she had some issues with the friends and the friendship circles and all of that. And I just helped her within a session to understand what's going on and connect with her emotions, and the anxiety significantly diminished and she could go back to school again. So I just believe there's a number of interventions when a person is allowed to go into their emotions and process the emotions, a lot of the symptoms go away, and we don't need medical interventions or long-term treatment.
Right. I'm just trying to make sure that people that are watching and or listening don't draw a conclusion that what you're saying is that you can replace all medication, right?
Yeah, absolutely not.
Very
No.
important
Yeah.
to mention that there are cases where medication is truly required, and someone like yourself or a therapist or a psychologist or whatever professional help is required, but on top of the chemical imbalance that's happening, because that is really why someone, correct me if I'm wrong, would take a medication for, say, anxiety, is there's a chemical imbalance there, right? It's not the pill that you take and everybody feels good. There's a true chemical reason why somebody should take something like that and would be prescribed something like that, correct?
Yes, correct. And there is very current research, maybe in the last 5 or 10 years, that demonstrates that any chemical imbalance can be caused by beliefs or some misperception in the mind. And if the mental imbalance is cleared or brought back into homeostasis or harmonization, then the chemical imbalance disappears as well.
Interesting.
So it's possible that if we change our beliefs, and not just by doing some kind of a
right.
mental exercise or something, it takes some work, but you can change the belief, and the chemistry of the brain, of the body, changes as well. An example is that if you're walking through a dangerous area, your body is going to literally give you feedback to tell you it's dangerous. You're going to feel anxious. You're going to feel stressed. You're going to feel, whoa, so symptoms happen in your body.
Right.
And they're there to tell you that it's dangerous. Be on high alert. So your adrenal system becomes alive. The brain starts being on high alert. Your blood pressure goes up, because why? If you need adrenaline to run or fight or something, you need blood pumped throughout your whole body. So this is a natural physiological response that happens under times of stress, or perceived stress, not just actual stress. Because when you're in a dangerous area, something hasn't happened to you. It's the expectation that something might happen that creates this high alert. So now we're living in a world where we're pretty safe, but you've got an alarm clock ringing in the morning, shocking you awake. Stress. Then, oh my God, okay, let me take a coffee so I can wake up, shock your system awake again, because you haven't had enough sleep to rest, to calm and reprocess the brain. So it's another shock. Now your body goes on alert mode because of the coffee. And then who knows what else? We drive through traffic and all that stress to get to work. So now you arrive at work and you're stressed. And then you got the stress of the day at work, performance and meetings and someone shouting at you and you haven't delivered this and all of that. So there's all the stress of the day. And then the rush to get home on time, and then people have their children and family obligations and cook and whatever, and they get to bed late because of all that stress, or they might have a workout to decompress. But the point is, the day, our life has been designed to kind of tolerate a high level of stress. We don't have any means to decompress that stress. We go to sleep, and sleep is one way to support the system to recover from stress, but we don't sleep properly. We're on our cell phones at night until we switch off the lights to go to bed. And what the cell phone does is it gives the eye an indication that it's daytime. So from the time you switch the cell phone off and it's dark, the eye has gotten the indication that, okay, now sunset is happening. So it needs 2 to 3 hours, maybe 4 hours before you get the signal to release melatonin to have deep sleep. So you might have gone to sleep, but deep sleep isn't activated because your melatonin isn't fully released. And by the time you get the full melatonin release and get into the REM sleep and the deeper sleep that we're supposed to, we have only 1 or 2 cycles where we need 2 or 3 cycles, for example, or 4 cycles of deeper sleep. So we don't get the quality of sleep that we need, and then we wake up stressed the next day. And coming back to chemical imbalance, your system is overstressed. It produces stress hormones and stress chemicals to help you stay alive and awake and all of that and get through the day. And your sympathetic nervous system is overactive, and you don't get into parasympathetic mode to relax and calm yourself. So a chemical imbalance can emerge simply because there's constant stress and stimulation in the environment. So this is an example of what can happen, or what does happen to us on a daily basis. In addition to that, there's childhood traumas that might have happened that caused a misperception in the mind, or caused a a traumatic experience, and that traumatic experience stays in the memory and causes some kind of dissociation and an overactivity of certain chemicals, and that's why they need chemicals to numb down or calm or relax or etc. But coming back to it, if we just keep numbing it with chemicals, then we're not healing the cause. And I'm a very strong believer of going back and resolving the cause, and I believe the symptoms will go away, and we don't need a dependency on chemicals. Interventions, yes, interventions on medicine and all that, but we can put an end to the dependency, and that's what I want to try to empower people to do, so they can have more fulfilled and more empowered lives, rather than being dependent on all these outside sources. We literally do have the power to transcend a lot of that.
For the people listening that don't know, you are located in South Africa, correct?
I moved from South Africa. I spent 29 years there, and I'm based in Cyprus at the moment in the Mediterranean, which is a very interesting and beautiful Mediterranean island. It's a Greek island, wide history, and it's hot 300 days of the year.
Is most of your practice online?
Most of it. I see many clients online because I work internationally. So yes.
Which brings me to the next question. So being that you're international, right? Your practice is international via online. Do you find that different parts of the world have more stress because of the culture is different and their daily life is just different? Whether it's working hours or the way the culture is such that maybe one person in the family works and takes care of the large family, right? There might be 10 or 15 people per household, right? So you find that different parts of the world, not that it's better or different or less stress, because it's not. It's just they're normal, but parts of the world have different types of stress due to their conditions that they're living in.
Absolutely, and that's a great question and great observation. That, and it's true what you say. So we can live in just in one country. You can live in a city that's busy and upbeat, like New York, for example, or London. These are busy cities, and there's a certain pace that the city dictates, or the people of the city, because the people. The pace of the people dictate the pace of the city, not the city dictates the people, and that becomes the resonance or the morphogenic field of that city. But in certain cities the pace is much higher, and I think just because of that pace it can cause an additional level of stress. But some places, like living on an island, there's you go there and you immediately feel more relaxed, calmer. Your system calms down. So it does have to do with the pace of the place.
What percentage, what country is your largest client?
I tend to, so when I was training coaches, I got involved with the community in the Netherlands and Belgium. And I actually get a lot of clients from there because they know me and work for me. But so a lot from Europe, Belgium, Netherlands, Germany. I've expanded that into Russia, into South Africa, some locally here at Cyprus, some in the UK, some in the US as well. Now getting some clients from Australia. So it's kind of varying. The majority here in Europe.
How many languages do you speak?
I speak English, Greek, and in South Africa, there's a language called Afrikaans, which is similar to Dutch. I learned it. I don't speak it very much or very well, but I understand it quite well, yeah.
Okay. What is the primary focus of your practice in terms of, do you deal with a lot of professionals say, or is it mainly just the average person that is trying to work through some personal items?
I find very few of the average person come to me because of the level that I work. So people that come to me are generally, they have done personal development. They're either coaches or trainers or therapists, or they're involved in some kind of spiritual healing or different modalities. They're people that have done work on themselves and generally realize that, okay, there's a resistant pattern, there's something consistent, that something's not changing, and they don't understand why. So those are the people that tend to come to me. Some people that haven't done any work on themselves, I do work with some, and I have great joy in working with them, especially when a person says, look, they acknowledge that something's not right and they want to work through it. So yes, some do, but the majority of people that have worked on themselves already and are already trained as a coach or a trainer.
Do you prefer working with another peer rather than a person that has never had any sort of therapy or any sort of training?
Yeah, in a way, yes, because then it's much easier to just get in and get going to the root of the problem. And yeah, that's the area I like to work in. I like to go and find the cause. And some people that haven't done much work, they still need to, their pace is a little bit slower, which is okay. I work with some of those, but the pace is a bit slower because they need some support to go through the emotional processing.
Interesting. I was not expecting that answer, actually. I thought for sure you were going to say that you would bring in anybody and prefer that because then you can share it your way because you're dealing with someone that doesn't have a preconceived notion of what therapy is, right? Unfortunately, especially in the US where I'm located, there's a big stigma on therapy,
Yeah.
right? Unfortunately. And that if someone goes to therapy or someone needs therapy or wants therapy, that there's something really wrong with them mentally and emotionally. Whereas I'm a proponent of therapy and believe that probably more people should have therapy than they do. So I was kind of surprised to hear you say that you want to deal on the professional space more than I would call it the civilian space, if you will.
Yeah, I'd love to. So one of my missions in life is to educate people on how the mind and emotions work. That's one of the things I'd love to do. And along with that, to remove the stigma on therapy. And I don't actually want to call it therapy because therapy already has this, there's something wrong with you. You're
Right.
going to therapy or you're going to a psychologist or something because something's wrong with you. And my approach is that there's nothing wrong with you. So anybody that comes to me, there's nothing wrong with them. That's immediately the thinking that I have about the person. There's nothing wrong with anybody. What is going on is they're not congruent with themselves. They're not connected to their inner truth. They're having a misperception about reality, or they've had some kind of experience, a traumatic event or something that's causing them to have repeat patterns or shame or guilt or fear or anger or something. So there's an event that has caused that they haven't been able to process, they haven't been able to work through on their own, and that is stuck inside their system, inside emotionally or in their thoughts, and it repeats certain patterns. So I don't know what to call this yet. I'm looking for a word, but I believe everybody needs some kind of a resource to self-reflect that's mental and process emotionally. So, for example, when we are boiling water inside a pressure cooker, the water boils and boils and boils, and eventually there's nowhere to escape. So it explodes and there's steam, the pressure releases and the steam comes out. The same with us emotionally. If we don't have a way to process emotions, we're going to at some time explode, either with tears or with anger or some other explosion. And all of a sudden we feel better. Yeah, once we release. So there are ways to, and there's many ways to do that emotional release, but most people are not aware that they need to. And sleep is one of them. Sleep is one way where we configure the brain, decompress, relax ourselves, and then restart the next day. And some people are just overstimulated. There's a number of things that affect us. So I believe I'm looking for another word, something else that removes the stigma of therapy, or what therapy means to people,
Sure.
to support people to understand that we need space for ourselves. Call it self-care.
Absolutely.
Or time with yourself, and very few people do that. They're out there with people, they're working, they're doing a bunch of things. When they're with them on their own, they're stimulating themselves with television or videos or YouTube or social media. There's constant stimulation. Very few people take the time to go inside and check in. How am I feeling? What's happening with me? And that can be a very simple practice that people can do. You don't have to call it a meditation or something, but just go and be with yourself 5-10 minutes a day and relax. Go inside yourself and feel, how am I? What emotions are going through me right now? What are my thoughts? Maybe write down your thoughts. And it's time with yourself. So I believe this should be a basic practice that we've lost. The other thing that I believe where we as humanity went wrong is our disconnection from nature. Nature is a great healer on its own. You spend 3 days in nature, amongst the trees, rivers, in nature, without any technology, without any, just being with yourself or with a group of people connected to nature. And a lot of that stress, a lot of the anxiety, a lot of the mental illness that we label as mental illness will literally disappear just because of being in an environment that is close to who we truly are. We evolved from nature. We are nature, and we forget that a lot of the time.
We certainly do. Going back to the previous question, Matheo, why not, if you're training other professionals and those professionals would agree to it, why not list those professionals on your website? So if people find somebody in that region that those professionals are located, they're able to get help from a Matheo trained therapist.
Yeah. It's in the pipeline.
Okay.
It's in the pipeline. So I've trained some coaches in ICF accredited coach. I've trained over 200 coaches in live trainings, ICF level. But I'm starting from next year to train coaches in my methodology, people that have gone through my transformation process. And it's in the pipeline. So that's the plan. And thank you for confirming it. It's like my my higher self saying, hey, do this.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
You mentioned some writings that people can purchase and learn something. Tell us what that is exactly, if you don't mind. And I'll put links below for everyone.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jason. It's I call them the Know Yourself teachings.
Okay.
Over many years, I've been looking at how do I put everything I've learned together in a set of teachings that I can teach people how life works. What I didn't have as a child, what I wasn't able to do and make sense of as a child were my emotions and my thoughts. Where do thoughts come from? Why are they there? What can we use our thoughts for? And there's a lot of information out there in the world, in mainstream and all of that. However, it's separated. And what I've attempted to do is bring it all together in a clear, understandable form that can be a shortcut for people to understand the principles that are taught out there. A lot of it can be confusing or difficult to apply. So what I do in the first video, your inner guidance system, is support you to understand thoughts and emotions as a guidance system, how you can guide your life using thoughts and emotions. And the first step is to allow and accept you have emotions. That's the first step, to accept and integrate the emotions and have connection to them, and then to learn how to use them as a guidance system. I talk about beliefs and how our lives are run by beliefs and how to resolve beliefs. I talk about family systems work, which is, I haven't seen it spoken of in many mainstream, the current personal development models that are out there. I have not heard of family systems work, and I believe this is something we need to bring out there. So I explain how it works. I explain what it is, what are the different various patterns that we take on from previous generations, how does it work, and how to start to resolve them. I also share a video. So these are all in videos. There's there's 4 modules, 5 modules, because I give a bonus modules on understanding levels of consciousness, and that on different levels of awareness, we interpret data, we interpret the world differently. So you might find a person who's living in a paradigm of fear, they're going to interpret the world according to their fears. Someone else who's living in a paradigm of joy will interpret the same data as joyful, and so different levels of awareness interpret data different ways. And also share a video on the external guidance system. So what happens, how does the world react to us when we don't live according to our own inner guidance system, when we're not guiding our life by our own truth? See, when we're derailed, we need something to bring us back on track, and that's the external guidance system. So I introduce that as well. And this is simply to help people to learn to guide their lives, so they don't need a guru or some kind of person to tell them, or a book or anything, or even me to tell them how to live their lives. My ultimate aim is to support people to connect to themselves, so they know without a shadow of a doubt what their truth is. And these teachings are available as the Know Yourself teachings. And I'm very, very happy to bring this out to the world, because it's a huge contribution I want to make.
And these Know Yourself videos, are they for the professional, or are they for everyone?
These are for everyone.
These are for everyone.
These are for everyone. Yeah.
Very important there, right?
Yeah. In addition to that, I am in the process of writing a book. I'm in the editing phase, which has taken forever, which is also for everyone. I want to help people understand how feelings of unworthiness or low self-worth happen. And there's different causes. People think, oh, I'm not worthy. But there's different causes, different aspects that cause low self-worth. And I use some aspects of the inner guidance system teachings and the Know Yourself teachings, so people can understand, okay, this is what's causing my low self-worth, and they can go and deal with it. Not just thinking it's one blanket, I'm not worthy.
What is the ETA for your book, do you think, at this point?
March 2021.
Understood.
Yeah.
March of 2022, you think?
Yeah, I think I'll have it out next year.
Will it be self-published?
That's something I'm debating. I might self-publish. I might go with a publisher. I spoke to someone this morning, actually, whom I'll be on his podcast later in the year, who mentors writers. We might have a conversation around having it properly published.
That'd be wonderful. And my last question, Matheo, is any of this work at some point going to get peer-reviewed?
Wow. Wonderful question. Yes, I didn't have that in mind, but that's a great thing to have in mind, to kind of legitimize it, I suppose. So it's not
Correct.
just me saying it.
That's the only reason I ask. Is I'm not questioning the work. It's about if it's peer-reviewed and other people agree, give feedback, right, constructive criticism to it, and you can change it, choose to change it or not, but it really has the potential, I should say, to legitimize it around the world, right, and create almost a new space. I'm not trying to be your coach now, but
No, but you are. That's a powerful piece of gold or wisdom that I'll take away and definitely start to consider as I expand.
wonderful.
Yeah.
And my last question, this is for sure. You mentioned sleep being really important to people, and I believe that I could name the top 5 that you would say, but I want to hear it from you. 5 things that everybody that listens or watches this podcast can take away for something that is for self-care for themselves. What do you recommend? Sleep is number 1. Give me your number 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Okay.
Or
So,
I can tell you what I would think, but I would like to hear it from you.
yeah. Thank you. So, I can expand on what to do to have a quality sleep, but that's that's one thing. So, definitely sleep. The second one I would add is connect to your emotions. Connect, acknowledge them. Don't disconnect from them. Don't avoid them. Don't make them wrong. Make every emotion right. Every emotion, no matter if it's labeled as good or bad or ugly or doesn't matter what, make it right. Allow yourself to have the emotion that you're having in that point. When you do that, you validate yourself and you validate the emotion that you're having in this moment in time. And we miss validation. And one simple way of validating ourselves is by validating what we feel and what we're thinking at any particular time. So validate your emotions by acknowledging them. Validate your thinking simply by acknowledging it, writing it down. So take some time in the morning or in the evening and write down your thoughts. What are you thinking? Put it down on paper. So those are 3 things. The 4th thing is have someone, a sounding board, a mentor, a therapist, it's like whatever, a friend that you can share your emotions, not talk about stuff, not talk about the birds and whatever, the traffic or the day, but just to be able to connect and share. Okay, this happened today. It made me feel like this. Yeah, just someone as a sounding board. What do you think? Someone you trust and feel safe with. And the 5th one, build strong connections. Connections with people, with family, with friends, with yourself. Connection. This is one thing we miss, and we connect with social media, we connect with our cell phones, we connect with the laptop, we connect with all this other stuff. But there's something about human connection that magnifies and multiplies the quality of our life. And I think a lot of people feel isolated, and that isolation, the internal isolation, kind of rolls and causes disharmony in a person's life. And that causes a lot of the problems. And human connection can kind of reduce a lot of the challenges that we're experiencing. So seek deep, meaningful connections.
Wonderful. Matheo, is there anything that I should have asked you or that you would like to share with us?
You did absolutely incredibly. I think I covered it all in the last question, and I don't think there's anything else I'd like to add to this. Nothing else comes to mind. I mean, I could go on for another hour if I really want to. But I want to thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you.
It's beautiful to come on and connect with someone who cares to make a difference in the world in the way that you're doing, generously and humbly. And I want to thank you for what you're doing and how you're doing it, and the little contribution you're making in the world. And it's a teacher of mine who taught me family constellation work. He came from a simple family, And he realized that his father lived a simple life. And he used to, in the beginning, complain that his father was such a simple man. Why could he not be a great man, whatever? But as my friend discovered that as a result of his father being so simple, he grew up having many opportunities. And as a result of that, so many people's lives are being impacted. But it started with his dad having a simple life that influenced his life that is now spreading out into the world. So I wouldn't discard the power of one small little change, one small little step, one simple effect one life can have on the many. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you so much. And it wouldn't be right if I didn't thank a client of yours who happens to watch my podcast named Jessica, I won't say her last name, for recommending I get in touch with you. So thank you to Jessica. Thank you to yourself. And for everybody watching, please go visit Matheo Galatis.com and you can contact them there. Thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Jason. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Find us on YouTube and Facebook at The Intellectual People Podcast and online at theintellectualpeoplepodcast.com. Check back for exciting new episodes.